Because of this deal, I will likely never flip a house again. Nobody is going to buy it with squatters living in the property. I was literally weeks away from having to go chips all in on a Powerball. This is also happening during COVID. There's some meth on the coffee table in my house. Not only am I getting sued, the sheriffs are busting down the door. There's a mattress over in the corner. There's all these extension cords. When I realized the deputies didn't even clear the whole property and there was another half dozen people. Squatters took the fridge, flooding the house. Little did I know this was just the start of the craziness. I've been involved in more than 600 real estate transactions, and by far, this is the absolute worst investment I have ever been a part of. I'm Anthony Beckham. Welcome to the channel where real estate is life. I'm a real estate broker and a real estate investor who's reconsidering his entire investment strategy because of this deal. So it all started with me getting a call from this guy. We'll call him Wilson. He says that his dad, we'll call him Old Man, needs help selling his property. It's a pretty typical call for me as a real estate broker. They wanted to know how much the property was worth. Well, for me to tell you how much your property is worth, usually I would walk through the house and I would have a good understanding of its condition and quality. Well, Wilson proceeds to tell me that Old Man has a couple stepsons that live in the property. We'll call them Tweaker and Schizo. Now, they're not gonna let me walk through the property, and if anything, they're gonna try to stop the real estate sale. So of course I have to break it to Wilson that I can only give him a rough idea of what the property is worth, and ultimately, if he really wants to get the property listed and sold, nobody is going to buy it with squatters living in the property. If I can't show the property to potential buyers, then the only person who would ever buy it would be an investor, which I own an investment company, so I told him I could get him a cash offer and we could see where it goes and see if it would make sense for him. So I come up with a number, we do a little bit of back and forth, and we agree on a time to meet with Wilson and Old Man to go over the documents and come up with an agreement. We all sign documents just like you would in any transaction, and I head on my merry way to go open escrow and get the transaction started. So remember, I'm buying this property without ever seeing the inside of it. I can't do any inspections. I can't have the septic checked. I mean, I literally can't do anything except for give Old Man my money and then wait for the deal to close and then start this eviction process. So as far as I can tell, the transaction is going smooth, everything's going good. We're just a couple weeks out from closing when I get a call from Wilson telling me that, hey, my Tweaker stepbrother decided he's gonna make an offer on the property. And so of course, I didn't want to get in the center of any family drama. I decided to step aside, terminate the transaction, and let them proceed. 2 or 3 months go by and I get another call from Wilson. And guess what? The deal fell through and they want to move forward with my offer. So we start the process over, we get things rolling, give it 30 days, we close on the property, and I am the proud new owner of 2 houses on 12 acres on a desirable side of town that just happens to be occupied by a couple of squatters. I call up my attorney, they start the eviction process, and we wait. That is until I get the news that not only am I getting sued, but Wilson is getting sued and they're even suing the Old Man. So I finally get to the fateful day where we get to sit in front of the judge and that, of course, they're gonna kick out the squatters. Well, once these other lawsuits come into the picture, the judge decides that he's not gonna kick the squatters out until these other lawsuits are resolved. Now keep in mind that I'm in the state of Oregon, which is very friendly towards tenants and not super friendly towards property owners. I figured that because the squatters weren't tenants, it wasn't gonna be an issue at all to get rid of them. Well, instead, it turns out that that heavily complicates the process, and now we're looking at an ejectment action instead of an eviction, which can take 6 to 12 months. This is also happening during COVID, which means that court dates are about a year apart because they are so backed up. So at this point, I'm thinking this deal is flipping crazy. First of all, I've never been sued before. I have a ton of money that's tied up in this thing in a down payment, and I agreed on a balloon payment further down the road, which meant I was gonna have to come up with another couple $100,000 for the Old Man. Shouldn't be a big deal in the grand scheme of things because usually we'd have this house remodeled and we refinance it and boom, we pay off Old Man. Well, now everything is gonna take at least 10 times as long as I thought it would, and we can even get started on the remodel until we get these squatters out, which at this point we have absolutely no idea how long that is going to take. So fast forward 2 years of legal and court battles and I have my balloon payment due. This is $200,000 in cash I have to come up with to pay off the balloon. And of course, no mortgage or traditional loan people want to get involved in a house that's dilapidated and inhabited by squatters. I was literally weeks away from having to go chips all in on a Powerball or putting it all on red and roulette so that I could come up with 200 grand to actually pay off this balloon. But luckily, it timed out just perfect where I sold one of my other properties, took all the capital and was able to use that to save this terrible real estate transaction that I wish that I was never involved in. All the while, the squatters are still living in the property rent-free. I'm paying property taxes, I'm paying insurance, and I'm paying for legal fees to keep this stupid thing going. Lucky for me, I finally got some good news, which was that the squatters were dropping all of the lawsuits. It came out, of course, after several court dates that they weren't going to win, and the relative that was paying for all the legal fees and everything for the squatters finally decided that they were gonna back off. So 6 months go by, we have our final court date, and of course I get awarded the property that I have now rightfully owned for 3 years. So great news, right? I finally got the property that I've been waiting for all these years, that I have literally hundreds of thousands of my own personal savings tied up in, that has kept me from doing all these other real estate deals and pursuing all these other business ventures because I've been stuck with this problem property. Little did I know this was just the start of the craziness. Turns out in the state of Oregon, even though these people knew that they didn't own the property for 3 years, I have to give them a reasonable amount of time where I come and I babysit them while they take the remainder of their belongings out of the house. So the way that it works is once the court actually orders the eviction, the sheriff's office goes out there and they tell everybody to leave and they scare them all off of the property. So we show up with the sheriff and a couple of deputies, and it's actually pretty quick and easy. They tell Tweaker he needs to get out, and they tell Schizo to hop in the car, and both of them leave. Easy peasy. So here I get to walk into the house for the very first time, which should be a very exciting experience, but instead, there's some meth on the coffee table. It looks like these guys had never started packing. There's no boxes. If you didn't know any better, you would think that these guys didn't even know that this was coming. So while I'm going through the Tweaker house and I'm fully disappointed in how much work has to be done, I notice that the sheriffs are busting down the door of the little guest house in the back. So all along, I was told that the guest house was dilapidated and nobody had lived in it for years, and that's why Schizo lived in a broken down fifth wheel on the back of the property. Well, as soon as they kicked down the door, I could see a TV on. And honestly, I was kind of excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, that back unit is actually livable? Well, all the excitement I had quickly faded away when a Hispanic family stepped out onto the front porch asking what the heck was going on. Well, it turns out they were paying Tweaker in the front house rent, and they had lived there for over a year. In my house, on my property, and he was collecting rent the entire time. So now I'm put in this entirely weird position because the deputy turns to me and he's like, so do you want us to still kick out this nice little family? And I have to kind of scramble and I kind of explain that, you know, I don't really know these people. I've already been screwed so hard on this transaction. I really can't risk anything, but ultimately I'll give them another 24 hours to get all of their stuff moved out and give them the benefit of the doubt that they're going to listen. The deputy says, hey, I got this all recorded. They've agreed to it. If they don't, I'll come back and I'll drag them out of here. All that sounds fine to me. While I feel really bad, at least they have a little bit of extra time, and of course, the sheriff and all the deputies leave. And just as soon as that deputy pulls out into the street and starts to leave, I notice another guy hiding behind the shop over there. So of course, I go check it out. Turns out they have a whole bunch of makeshift huts that they've built on the back of the property. There's cots in the shop, there's a mattress over in the corner, there's all these extension cords ran, there's a little TV, there's even an outdoor shower. And that's when I realized the deputies didn't even clear the whole property, and there was another half dozen people living on the back of the property in these makeshift huts in a little village. So now I'm pissed because the deputy put me on the spot. I gave those people an extra 24 hours. I go knock on the door and I'm like, hey, you guys didn't tell me that there was a dozen people living in huts on the back of the property. What's up with that? And that's when they say, well, those are our workers. Turns out they own a landscaping company, they do a taco truck, and apparently these are illegal immigrants that work for them. So now I got the full picture. You got Tweaker, and he's renting out to the nice little Hispanic family in the back house. Then you got the back house that's pimping out a bunch of these migrant workers that live on the back of the property. So at this point, I made it clear that I was upset. I felt like they weren't honest with me, and not only did the family need to be out of there within the next 24 hours, but I wanted to make sure that the whole village was cleared out. At this point, it seemed like the longer I stayed at the property, the crazier this shit was gonna get. So I called it a day and I got the hell out of there. Fast forward 24 hours and the nice little Hispanic family and all of their workers had vacated the property, and they were super respectful and easy to work with. Now I had the job of working with Tweaker and Schizo, the people who I had been fighting in court for the last 3 years, on letting them come back to the property a half dozen times so that they could collect all of their junk. They were busy packing the last of their boxes in the dark because of course they had already taken the electricity out of their name, and they were asking if they could take the fridge as well. Of course, I didn't want their grody fridge, so I told them, yeah, go for it. Thank God that was the last of their stuff, and that was the last that I was gonna have to deal with them. Start of a new chapter, we can now start with the remodel. That Friday, I get power turned on into my name and we get the contractor scheduled for Monday. But when the contractors show up on Monday, we have a whole new host of problems. It turns out that whenever the squatters took the fridge, they left the fridge line open, and guess what? When I turned on the power on Friday into my own name, well pump turns on, and it had been flooding the house the entire 3-day weekend. Well, now we had to tear the entire house down to the studs. We had to do an asbestos abatement and a mold mediation, which I didn't even know that was possible with only 3 days of water, but apparently mold grows really damn fast. So fast forward to today, and we're 6 months into remodel, and we still have a little ways to go. What should have been a slam dunk where I would make hundreds of thousands of dollars, I still might make $100,000 when it's all said and done, which could be worse. I could lose money, but my point stands that the deal wasn't worth it. Once you calculate in nearly 4 years of my life, all of the stress, the fact that I was involved in this legal battle, and I have the fact that I've missed out on millions of dollars worth of deals that I had to skip because so much of my revenue was tied up in this shit deal, and I still have it going and it's still far from done. The moral of the story is stay away from squatter properties. If that's not your specialty, if you don't have experience with that, if you're not a frickin' attorney or something, probably not worth fighting. The other lesson might be stay away from blue states altogether, or states that are very tenant friendly, or at least have a very good idea of the laws and the kind of time frames that you're looking at if you do have to file an ejectment or an eviction. I've completely had to throw away the idea of Airbnbs because I'm gonna have far too much money invested into this property for it to cash flow. So I have to flip it, I have to put it behind me, and then we'll invest that capital into other deals. To put this in perspective, 2 weeks ago, I closed a wholesale transaction that I didn't touch. I didn't pick up a hammer. I didn't have to manage any contractors. I spent about 3 hours total on the deal and made approximately $30,000. If you do some quick math on that, that's $10,000 an hour. Now, how much am I gonna make on a project that I spend more than 4 years on and make 100 grand? I don't know, it's probably 10 bucks an hour. Not to mention I helped do the cleanup. I even brush hogged the entire field behind the place because I couldn't find anybody to do that. It's been a pain in the ass. And so we're not gonna do any large remodels anymore. I'm gonna wholesale, I'm gonna wholetail, I'm gonna do anything that isn't flipping houses. So I hope you guys can take this lesson and hopefully it saves you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in your real estate career. Stay tuned and I'll keep you up to date on what it actually sells for when we do get there, which at this point looks like might be next winter or something like that. So this story is far from over.